I'm Nick, I'm another import. Originally from the UK, I have a background working for a water utility known as Southern Water. For natural systems utilities, I work as a sustainability engineer and corporate responsibility officer. What I'm going to talk to you about today is an approach we've been taking towards looking at sewering in communities, exactly answering the kind of questions that we're talking about here. So how do we make it affordable? How can we achieve green infrastructure? How can we find benefits? And most importantly, make this solution work for the particular community. We like to call it boutique utility, where we're going in not with a specific template, but we're looking at the individual needs of each community and how to make this work. And fantastically for me, my predecessing speakers did such a great job of defining everything, it's going to make this presentation far easier to give. We've already lost about 5 minutes of definition giving. Because exactly like Valerie says, what we're hoping to be pointing out here is how all these things are interconnected. The wastewater, the water, the energy, nutrients, society, money. Exactly like Ken said, we need to look for opportunities to create phasing. And the reason why is because we want to take advantages of the ability to change our mind as we see advances in both science and technology and the need to react to the economy. And then, exactly like Nick said, covered a whole number of points. Most importantly, we need to make things work economically. And this is where I'm going to be focusing, is how can we reposition finance, how can the private sector be involved here to actually make this work. So I'm going to be focusing on the case study of Littleton, Massachusetts. It's a town which is about 20 miles west of Boston. It's part of the Boston metro area, for those of you who don't know it. It is very proud of the fact that it has maintained a very idyllic and rural characteristic. But they are in a situation now where they want to see some economic growth, but they want to do it right. They don't want to have the kind of sprawling growth that has been synonymous with development over the past 20 years, cluster developments, strip malls. What they've already started doing is putting into place the mechanisms to have specific zoning in their existing commercial area to focus development right there. But to actually enable that, they need to provide sewering infrastructure. And so we're talking about a sewer system which will be designed to serve this small downtown area. You can see on the map here what a small part of the overall township the actual downtown area is. And one of the difficulties in the past which communities have faced is it's very difficult to make sewers affordable at this scale for a very focused sewer district. Generally speaking, the way they do it is they expand the sewer district so that they can absorb the capital cushion over a larger user base, and then actually have something which is a much larger system, higher overall capital requirements, but smaller individual costs. And so we had to come in and say, is there a way we can look at this and fix it? At the same time, can we do it right? Can we maximize the environmental and social benefits of this solution? So just to give you an idea of what size of system we're talking about here, I just want you to focus on this number here. This is the result of a 20-year build-out for the downtown area. A lot of it's going to be new development. And overall, they're talking about 225,000 gallons per day once you consider existing and new development of wastewater infrastructure, which would be required. Now, they have about 40,000 gallons per day for one existing commercial tenant. So we were looking at how to design a system which is going to be absorbing about 180,000 gallons per day or so in an affordable manner. And the way we have started doing this is with an approach we developed with the Charles River Watershed Association called smart sewering. And we've identified 6 key aspects to smart sewering, and the majority of them come from a financial perspective. But first of all, first and foremost, we begin every single project by exploring community values. We need to understand what's important to the community before we come in with a solution. Because a lot of what happens is people come in with preformed ideas that have worked in other communities. They'll say, here's a template, here's what it would cost. It goes to referendum, and folks say, no, thank you. And no advance happens, no growth happens. So community values are very important. Environmental issues. We secondly consider the entire town and look for ways that we can actually improve the current situation or at least create no further detriment through new development. Thirdly, a big one here is minimizing risk to the tax base. One of the major reasons why these things get voted down in referendums is because, like I say, it usually is the case that the sewer is going to require more people to be in the sewer district than actually need and desire the sewer. And what happens is, if you have a publicly funded system, all of the risk to actually develop this very large-scale system has to be assumed by the tax base. But what happens when things go wrong with this risk? The tax base has to react and subsidise. So generally speaking, this is one of the major reasons why these things get voted down in a referendum. We need to minimise the risk to the tax base. Once we have these pieces in place, and we understand the mechanisms to do that, then we can start looking at what kind of technology options we're dealing with. And this is exactly the point that Ken was making. There's no one solution. We're not coming in here and saying, this is the technology that everybody needs to use. There's no wrong answer. It just needs to actually fit and make sure that it works. So consider on a case-by-case basis. Next, once we have the best solution technologically, we look at where we're at economically, and we say, is this going to be affordable for people in this area? And if we say no, we start looking at ways to improve affordability, mainly by considering waste as a resource, exactly what Nick was saying. Can we create subsidies through water reuse, through waste to energy generation? And to some degree, this is a little bit what Nick was referring to. Corporations should be paying for your waste. It's a valuable resource. The way we look at it is, we bring the waste in, we repurpose it, and in the Littleton model, we're using it to subsidise the sewer service. So effectively now, the waste will be paying for itself. And then finally, we optimise using an economic feasibility analysis so we can present a range of scenarios to the community. But just to kick off, community values. We used to start these off by doing one-day charrettes, and they were great. We'd go in and we'd gauge, generally speaking, public opinion to sewer, what people's concerns were. We'd also really delve into local expertise about the geography and what opportunities were to improve the environment. And what we usually find is that we have a room of 10 people. And so these midweek charrettes just weren't really working in terms of capturing a true representation of community values. So we changed the game for Littleton, and we went web-based. We launched this. It was a survey which we refined with a small focus group in Littleton first. We sent it out for about a month on the web, and we got back around about 232 responses asking questions to do with community values, parameters which were defined from the town's master plan. We studied the plan, we said, right, here are the things that you folks say are important to you. We revisioned them in the context of sewering, and we said, take a vote. What's really important? How can we move forward here? And as we expected, the most important one that came out, it was twice as important as anything else, was the risk to the tax base. People were adamant that there was going to be no risk to the tax base, that only those people that needed the sewer should have to fund it. And so that's where we went to. Next, looking at environmental issues, very briefly, the town of Littleton has two watersheds. It has the Merrimack River watershed and the Concord River watershed. You can see the divide between them on this red line here. They have 3 public wells, which are all in one watershed. You can also see the Zone 2 and Zone 3 delineations, the discharge. Now, what happens is the public water system runs through the entire town. And because recharge is based on a single lot septic system network, we are getting a net transfer of water from one watershed to the other, a movement from the Merrimack watershed to the Concord watershed. And this is actually having quite a large implication for natural stream flow. This looks at the percentage attenuation on natural stream flow in the various subbasins of those 2 watersheds. And you can see that in this one here, this is one of the major sub-watersheds for providing the public water. In low flow conditions, we've seen around about a 67% reduction in natural stream flow. So we knew that we were going to have to discharge into the Merrimack watershed. Whatever we were going to build here was going to have to bring that water back into the watershed from which it was originally extracted. So we started honing down on the actual study area. Again, you can see the divide of the watersheds here. You can see the Zone 2 delineation. Well, there was this big chunk of land, around about 80 acres or so, which is actually in the study area. Part of it running across DOT right-of-way, part of it being a large parcel owned by a private developer that had recently been repurposed for development. And we saw a great opportunity here to incorporate all of this discharge right in the actual area where it was being created.